They called us the Watchers. Not a particularly creative bunch, those Pentagon suits. We were a mixed bag. Scientists with more degrees than a thermometer. Engineers who could build a spaceship in their sleep if they had the parts. And a couple of us grunts who'd spent too much time staring at radar screens. Our mission: figure out what the hell those things in the sky were, and how to stop them, if stopping them was even an option. We were stationed out in the middle of nowhere. Nevada desert stretching out around us like a bad dream. Our base was all concrete bunkers and barbed wire. A monument to paranoia and secrecy. The air buzzed, not with the desert heat, but with a tension you could cut with a knife. Dr. Helen Chen, our resident astrophysicist, was the closest thing we had to a leader. She was all sharp edges and cool confidence, but even her voice got a little thin when she talked about the triangles. And Dr. Lewis, our shrink, he'd stare at us sometimes. Eyes like two chips of ice behind those thick glasses, and you just knew he was seeing things. Things none of us wanted to think about. We spent our days huddled around monitors. The grainy images of the triangles burned into our retinas. Those things were fast, faster than anything we could throw at them. And the way they moved, it was wrong. Like they were playing a different game with different rules. A game we didn't even know how to play. They're drawn to our nukes, one of the analysts, a skinny kid named Davis, said one day. Like moths to a porch light. He was right. The triangles, they had this nasty habit of showing up near our nuclear facilities. Hovering there, silent and watchful, like vultures waiting for a meal. It made your skin crawl, made you think about things man was not meant to know. And the headache, those started a few weeks in. Dull aches at first, then sharper, like someone was driving an ice pick into your skull. We all got them, even Dr. Chen, though she'd deny it till her teeth turned blue. Lewis called it anomalous neurological activity. We called it the beginning of the end. The desert had a way of getting under your skin. Not just the heat, though that was bad enough, but the silence. Big, empty, like God had taken a nap and forgotten to wind the clock. Out here, it felt like we were the only ones left, which was a lie, of course. We weren't alone. That was the whole damn problem. They brought in a psychologist, said it was to help us cope with the stress. Dr. Lewis, bookish guy, nervous tick in his cheek that got worse every time a blip crossed the radar screen. He asked us about our dreams, our fears, made notes in a little black book. I knew what he was looking for. Cracks in our facades, signs that we were coming unspooled. Truth was, we were all unraveling, just at different speeds. My unraveling was slow and steady, like a fuse burning down. I hadn't slept a full night since that first sighting back at NORAD. The image of that triangle, moving like a phantom on the screen, it was seared into my brain. I was a radar operator, for God's sake. I understood how things were supposed to move, the laws of physics, the limitations of technology. Those triangles, they laughed at our laws, mocked our understanding. We weren't equipped for this. A handful of scientists, a shrink who looked like he could use a shrink himself, and a few jarheads like me, trained to fight wars against other men, not things. The weight of it, the sheer scale of the unknown we were staring into. It was enough to make you want to crawl into a bottle and forget your own name. Then came the news reports. Whispers at first, then full-blown panic. The triangles weren't just our problem anymore. They were everywhere. Moscow, Beijing, Tokyo, buzzing airfields, hovering over cities. A silent global ballet of fear. The first nosebleed happened in the mess hall. One minute, Davis was shoveling scrambled eggs into his mouth. The next, he was spitting out a mouthful of blood and yolk, his eyes wide with panic. We all froze, forks clattering onto trays. The silence thick and heavy. Then came the whispers, the sidelong glances. The fear that had been simmering beneath the surface now boiling over. It wasn't just the nosebleeds. We were all having nightmares, vivid, unsettling dreams that clung to us like cobwebs. The headaches were getting worse too, a constant throbbing behind the eyes that no amount of aspirin could touch. Dr. Lewis, ever the detached observer, started looking downright spooked. The real horror, though, unfolded in the lab. We were running tests on some new equipment, trying to isolate the energy signatures emanating from those damn triangles. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of monitors, the air thick with ozone, and a nervous energy I couldn't shake. That's when it happened. A high-pitched whine, like a dentist's drill from hell, cut through the room, followed by a flash of blinding light. I remember the smell of burning ozone, the taste of metal in my mouth, and then darkness. When I came to, the lab was a disaster. Papers scattered everywhere, equipment sparking and smoking. And Helen. She was slumped over her console, eyes wide open, staring at something only she could see. Helen? My voice sounded thin and reedy in the stunned silence. She didn't respond, just sat there, trembling, her gaze fixed on some point just beyond my shoulder. A cold dread snaked down my spine. Whatever she'd seen in that flash of light, whatever had touched her mind, it had scared her to her core. Helen, what did you see? She finally blinked, her eyes focusing on mine, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw something in their depths, a flicker of pure primal terror that chilled me to the bone. They're here, she whispered, her voice hoarse. They're already here. Sleep was a distant country, one I hadn't visited in what felt like weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, the lab swam back, the smell of ozone and burnt circuitry, the look on Helen's face. That look, it was like she'd seen the devil himself. So I walked. The desert night was cool, a vast emptiness pressing in on all sides. Out here, under the endless expanse of stars, the world felt smaller, more fragile, easier to break. The metal object, the one I'd found half buried in the sand, felt heavy in my pocket. Helen hadn't been able to tell me much. Alien tech, she'd called it. Her voice hushed with a mixture of awe and fear. Said it was like nothing she'd ever seen. I stopped, pulled it out. It fit perfectly in the palm of my hand. A smooth, featureless triangle, almost warm to the touch. I thought about tossing it into the darkness, letting the desert swallow it whole. But something held me back. A need to know, maybe? Or a fear of what I might find. Back at my quarters, a prefab concrete box they called a room, I sat in the flickering gaslight, turning the object over and over in my hands. It was almost hypnotic, the way the light played across its surface, like it was pulsating. Then I heard it, a faint hum, low and rhythmic, vibrating up my arm, resonating in my teeth. The room felt colder, the air suddenly thick and close. I dropped the object onto the table, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. The humming stopped. Silence, heavy and absolute, settled over the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had I imagined it? The desert played tricks on the mind, they said. Heat, exhaustion, fear. I reached for the object, picked it up again. Nothing. Cold metal, inert and lifeless. Just as I was about to convince myself I'd lost my mind, the humming returned. This time there was no mistaking it. It was coming from the object, a low, insistent thrumming that seemed to bore into my skull. And something else too. A pressure, building behind my eyes, pushing against the inside of my skull. I had to get rid of it. Toss it out the window. Bury it in the sand. Anything to make it stop. But I couldn't move. My hand was frozen, clamped around the object as if it were part of me. The room started to spin, the humming escalating into a high-pitched whine that seemed to tear at the edges of my sanity. And then, through the ringing in my ears, I heard it. A voice whispering my name. The voice was inside my head, a sibilant whisper that seemed to slither past my ears and burrow straight into my brain. Panic seized me, cold and sharp as shattered glass. I tried to shake my head, to dislodge the voice, but it was no use. It was there, inside me, and it was growing stronger. Michael. It spoke my name like a caress, a lover's whisper in the darkness. But there was no love in it, only a cold, calculating curiosity. My hand, still clamped around the metal object, began to burn, not with heat, but with a bone-deep cold that spread up my arm, a freezing fire that raced through my veins. I gasped, a soundless cry lost in the suffocating pressure building inside my skull. And then, The world exploded. I was staring down at myself, at my own body sprawled on the floor, the metal object still clutched in my hand. But I wasn't in my body. Not anymore. I was elsewhere. The room around me was vast, impossibly large. The walls a dizzying kaleidoscope of shifting colors and patterns. I was surrounded by things. Machines maybe, but unlike any I'd ever seen. Sleek, organic shapes that pulsed with an eerie internal light. And the beings. They were there, on the other side of the room, their forms shifting in and out of focus. Tall and slender, their bodies like smoke given form. Their eyes, large and black as the void, were fixed on me, dissecting me with a gaze that felt like a physical touch. Terror, pure and primal, flooded through me. I tried to speak, to scream, but no sound came out. I was a prisoner in a cage of my own mind, helpless to escape the cold scrutiny of my captors. One of the beings, the one whose voice I recognized, drifted closer. It stopped a few feet away, its form solidifying, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape. "Interesting," it said, its voice echoing in the vastness of the chamber. "You are different. Stronger." It reached out, a long, slender finger brushing against my cheek. The touch sent a jolt of pure ice through me, a feeling that was both exhilarating and terrifying. "We have plans for you, Michael," it whispered, its voice a caress of razors. "Big plans." The base was on lockdown. Armed guards patrolled the corridors, their faces taut with a fear they tried to mask behind a veneer of military discipline. The air crackled with a different kind of energy now, a palpable sense of dread that clung to the walls like stale cigarette smoke. They'd taken Helen away, carted her off on a stretcher, her eyes vacant, her face a mask of exhaustion. She hadn't spoken a word since that night in the lab, hadn't reacted to any of their tests. They called it shock, said her mind was overloaded, that she just needed time to recover. But I'd seen the look in her eyes, the hollow echo of something vast and unknowable staring back at me. She wasn't coming back. Dr. Rayer. Lewis, his face ashen, his hands trembling, tried to explain it away with medical jargon. Neurological overload, synaptic misfires, the brain's defense mechanisms kicking in. But even he couldn't hide the fear that flickered in his eyes. The fear of the unknown, of something beyond our comprehension. The headaches were worse now, a constant pounding drumbeat behind my eyes. And the nightmares, they were different too. Visions of those beings, those things. Their cold eyes, staring into my soul. Their voices whispering my name in a language I couldn't understand but felt in the marrow of my bones. We were falling apart, the team unraveling at the seams. Davis had stopped talking altogether, his eyes darting nervously around the room like a trapped animal. Two of the other scientists had cracked, one babbling about conspiracies and cover-ups, the other withdrawing into a silent catatonic state. Even the military brass, with their clipped tones and steely gazes, couldn't hide the fear that gnawed at their edges. We were outmatched, outgunned, and out of our minds. The enemy wasn't something we could fight with bullets and bombs. It was something else entirely. Something insidious. Something that whispered to the darkest corners of our minds, that fed on our fears, that turned our own thoughts against us. And the worst part was, we didn't even know why. They flew her in on a Chinook, a whirlwind of dust and noise that momentarily broke the oppressive silence that had settled over the base. Dr. Elizabeth Croft-Doty, a neurologist, they said, the best in the business, flown in from some hush-hush government lab to work her magic on our fried brains. She was a small woman, bird-like, with a shock of white hair and eyes that crackled with an almost manic energy. Neuroplasticity, she declared, brandishing the EEG readouts like they were holy relics. The brain rewires itself under stress. These visitors, they're just accelerating the process. Her theory, as far as I could follow it through the fog of my own aching skull, was that our brains were like old radios trying to tune into a station they weren't designed for. The headaches, the nosebleeds, the nightmares, all symptoms of our neurons struggling to keep up. We just need to give them a little push, she said, a sly smile spreading across her face. A little recalibration. Her treatment was a Frankensteinian mix of biofeedback, targeted impulses, and God knows what else. We sat in darkened rooms, wired to machines that buzzed and beeped, while Dr. Croft, her eyes gleaming with a fervor that bordered on the unnerving, monitored our every twitch and tremor. And for a while, it seemed to work. The headaches eased, the nightmares faded, and a semblance of normalcy returned to the base. We even allowed ourselves to hope, to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to coexist with these things. Then the lights went out. It started with a flicker, a dimming of the overhead fluorescence, and then the entire base plunged into darkness. Emergency generators sputtered to life, bathing everything in a sickly yellow glow that did nothing to pierce the shadows that seemed to writhe and coil around our feet. The silence was broken by a sound that sent shivers crawling down my spine. A low, throbbing hum, like the heartbeat of some monstrous beast, vibrated through the floor, through the walls, through the very air we breathed. We huddled together in the flickering light, our faces pale and drawn, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And when it did, it came from above, a blinding flash, a thunderclap that shook the very foundations of the base, and then a single, terrifying word echoing across the desert night. The word echoed across the desert, a single syllable of power that seemed to suck the air from my lungs. Leave. Not a request, an order. The earth itself seemed to tremble beneath the weight of it, the very stars blurring in the sky. And then, I saw it, rising above the compound, a black monolith against the backdrop of 1,000 flickering stars. It wasn't just a triangle anymore. It was immense, colossal, a cathedral of angles and edges that defied the very notion of scale. The humming intensified, a visceral vibration that seemed to pass through flesh and bone, resonating deep within my skull. My teeth ached, my vision swam, and a wave of nausea rolled over me, cold and relentless. Dr. Croft, her eyes wide and unblinking, grabbed my arm. Her grip surprisingly strong for someone so frail. "This is it, Major," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the roar. "This is what it all comes down to." Fear, primal and suffocating, threatened to overwhelm me. But beneath it, a flicker of defiance, a stubborn ember refusing to be extinguished. I'd come too far, seen too much, to surrender now. "They want us gone," I said, my voice hoarse. "But they made a mistake. They shouldn't have shown us what they are." I looked around at the faces of the others, pale and drawn in the flickering light of the emergency generators. Terror, yes, but also a flicker of that same defiance. A spark of defiance in the face of the abyss. We were scientists, soldiers, dreamers, all thrust together by a force we couldn't comprehend. But we were also human. And humans, in their own flawed, stubborn way, had a way of surprising you. I took a step forward, the humming intensifying, the pressure building inside my skull until I thought my head would explode. But I kept walking, each step a victory against the fear that threatened to drag me down. "They wanted to study us," I shouted, my voice raw, ragged. "They wanted to see what we were made of. Well, I've got a message for them." I stopped at the edge of the light, the monstrous ship looming above me like a predatory bird. The humming was deafening now, a symphony of power and menace, but I didn't flinch. "You want to know what we're made of?" My voice, though barely a whisper, seemed to cut through the roar. "We're the ones who don't give up. We're the ones who fight back." And with that, I raised my fist to the sky, a single act of defiance against the uncaring stars. Dust and silence. That's all that was left. The dust hung in the air, thick and gritty, reflecting the faint pre-dawn light that bled over the horizon. It coated everything. The sand, the scrub, the abandoned buildings, like a shroud of ash after a funeral pyre. And the silence. Twice. It was the silence of a graveyard, heavy and absolute, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the barbed wire fence that encircled the now empty compound. My defiance had amounted to nothing. The ship, that monstrous black triangle, had simply ignored me. Or maybe it hadn't. Maybe that was the worst part. Maybe my little act of rebellion, my feeble attempt to stand my ground, hadn't even registered on their radar. We were insects after all, buzzing around their feet, insignificant, easily swatted aside. Dr. Croft was gone. Vanished. 1 minute she was beside me, her eyes blazing with that manic energy. The next, gone, as if she'd never existed. The others, too, had simply disappeared. No trace, no explanation. Just empty buildings and the lingering scent of fear. The headaches were back, worse than ever. A searing pain lanced through my skull. 1,000 ice picks digging into my brain. And the voice, it was there too, whispering in the back of my mind. A constant sibilant murmur that I couldn't quite make out. It wasn't speaking words. Not exactly. It was more like concepts, ideas, flashes of images, terrifying in their strangeness and beauty. I stumbled back towards the main compound. My legs heavy, my stomach churning. I needed to get out of this desert, get to a phone, tell someone, anyone, what had happened. But a part of me knew it was already too late. They were inside my head now, those things. They had burrowed their way into the deepest recesses of my mind, and there was no escape. The silence stretched, a taut wire about to snap. And in that silence, I heard it again. The hum. Faint at first, then growing steadily louder. A deep, resonant thrumming that seemed to vibrate the very air itself. I didn't need to look up to know they were back. The desert laughed. A dry, brittle sound, carried on the wind that whipped through the abandoned compound, stirring up dust devils and memories. Memories I tried to bury, tried to drown in whiskey and sleepless nights, but they were always there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to drag me under. They never found my body. Not that there was much left to find. Just a pile of clothes, scorched and empty, like a snake's discarded skin. Another casualty in the silent war. Another name added to the ever-growing list of the vanished. The world had moved on. The triangles, those harbingers of our doom, had faded from the headlines, replaced by the mundane horrors of everyday life. Wars, famines, political scandals. Out of sight, out of mind. The sheep, content in their blissful ignorance, while the wolf stalked closer. But I hadn't moved on. How could I? They'd taken everything from me. My life, my wife, my sanity. They'd cracked me open, those things, peeled back the layers of my mind and poured in something else, something cold and alien, a presence that hummed just beneath my thoughts, a constant reminder of the abyss that awaited us all. They said I was crazy, paranoid schizophrenic, the doctors called it, hallucinations, delusions, a break from reality, easy explanations for the things they couldn't understand. They locked me away in a white room with padded walls, pumped me full of drugs that turned my dreams into nightmares and my nightmares into waking hellscapes. But they couldn't erase the truth. The truth was, I was the lucky one. They'd broken the others. Helen Davis, even poor, twitchy Dr. Lewis. They were gone, lost in the echoing corridors of their own shattered minds. But they'd left me intact. A witness, a messenger, a weapon. The change was slow, subtle, a shift in perception, a sharpening of the senses, a coldness that seeped into my bones on the coldest nights. The nightmares were fewer now, replaced by visions, flashes of distant planets, of cities that shimmered like mirages in the desert, of beings that defied description but filled me with a terror so profound it stole my breath. And the voice, it was clearer now, more insistent. It whispered of a coming storm, of a choice that had to be made, of a destiny I couldn't escape. It was a burden, a curse, but also a strange kind of liberation. Because in the face of the impossible, in the shadow of our inevitable annihilation, there was a terrifying kind of freedom. The doctors said I was getting better, that I was ready to rejoin the world. They were wrong. I wasn't getting better. I was getting ready. Ready for the day the sky split open and those ships returned. Ready for the day I would finally understand my purpose.